Hello, everyone. This is the Everything Dodgeball podcast. I'm your host, Stefan Leitinger, and this is the second part of my conversation with Nate Kreiter. In this part, we're going to go over the differences and similarities of the two different ball types and playing styles, the cloth and foam variation, which were played at this World Cup. So stay tuned when we try to dive even deeper into the specifics of the two different variations and what we might learn from the other side as well, and how we can improve both sides at the same moment. So without any further ado, let's jump right into it. I want to start with a little bit of a case for cloth, so to say. And the thing you pointed out, where you play the rules that are given to you, is something that I really take to my heart, because that is something, the first thing when I start a game and start a sport, I think about what are the boundaries and the rules that I have to take into account. And then I see all my possibilities in there and my limitations. And many people just want to force the thing that they like to do on the game and not take everything into considerations. And then they're missing a big part of the whole experience, I'd say. And I think the way you described it with England, and that's why I wanted you to talk about it, is exactly what I think is exciting dodgeball. And it's great to watch England play because they're always going fully at it. They're making incredible plays, incredible catches, incredible hits. And that is awesome. And I'm all for that. And I love that. But the way the rules are, and maybe they're not great, and I want to talk about this as well, but the way the rules are, it's just not the smartest way to play. It's a great way to play. And if you have the players for it, it's amazing. But if you don't have the players that England has, you're not going to win anything. And that's what lots of countries, I think, suffer from. If I would say Italy is a big example for me from that, where they have incredible players. They've played dodgeball for years now. They can catch, they can throw. They're really emotional about the sport, but they haven't learned to get their tactics and their fundamentals right. And they want to play dodgeball the way they play dodgeball. And that's just not going to cut it against really good teams. And that is really fun on an individual basis. And everyone likes to just do the highlight reels and throw and catch and dodge, which is all fun. And there is a place for it, but it's not the biggest part of the game. And the biggest part of the game is the fundamentals. And if you know your place and if you know the game well, then there is a big part for those moments as well. And the thing is, if I play a game perfectly, then my opponent watches the movie or the film and is that guy didn't do a lot. That didn't look very athletic, very spectacular, because he's just walking up and down, he's making a hit, he's making a block, but I can play against that. And then if you play against me, you're oops, that's a whole different animal. Because the thing is, I just do what I have to do. And I see what my opponent does, and then I try to just be a little bit better than him and punish everything that I see, every weakness that I see, I just am there to punish it. And slowly put my pressure on the game and try to get them to make even more mistakes and try to see where are their tendencies and where can I get them into overextending themselves. And that is, for me, that's the art of a team sport, basically, where you get your team together and really get them to play as one whole unit with no flaws in between, and get the opponents to play as individual players. And the thing is, we still lose to England because those 6 individual players are amazing. And even though we're better tactically, they're still going to hit us out and catch us because we make the perfect play and say we're going to put 2 to their face and they catch them both. So basically, and if you beat us that way, fair and square, you're just better. But over the last years, our skill evolved as well. And so we gotten closer to the individual skill as a team, and our depth has increased much, so that their individual skill isn't high above us anymore. And our teamwork and our cohesive tactics have just gotten to the next level where I think we are the better team. We didn't play them this year,
Yeah.
and we're going to test it out soon. But still, that's where I think that's the amazing thing about cloth, that you have to work as a team. And you can still turn sets around. But again, as you said, the other team has to make mistakes. And like Kim made 1 versus 4s and turned them around. In the final of the mixed game, we were down 3-6 in the last set, and there were 23 seconds to play, and we won that set. And that is, to me, mind-boggling. Of course, there were some highlight plays, and when I watch it, it fills my heart with joy and pride, and I'm completely stoked. And I know what I did there, but I know it happened because the opponents didn't understand the situation, and I did. And I forced them, or I didn't force them to do anything, but I gave them little tidbits and provoked them to make mistakes.
You put
and then
pressure.
they made them. Exactly. And then I capitalized on them. And often, even if you get them to make the mistakes are on such a high level that you're still not going to make the catch and still going to get hit and stuff. But over the long run, over a game of 40 minutes, it's going to add up. And that's where I think a game is won and lost, because every set is, sometimes it's close, sometimes it's a runaway. But that's what I think is really good, that you have 40 minutes and that you have lots of sets. And over 40 minutes, the better team in dodgeball wins, in my opinion. And sometimes it's so equal that it's overtime, and you can argue what was the one thing you did wrong. But in the end, I think dodgeball is really fair about the thing that the better team wins. Like, for example, soccer isn't that way. Over a league, the best team wins, but in a game, everyone has their chances. And in dodgeball, it's not that way. And I personally love that about the game. So,
no, I agree.
But the thing is, if you see us play and there is 1 minute left and we are up 4-1, we're just going to put the ball into places where we don't let the opponent catch them. And you can say that's boring because we play 1 minute and play it like that. Exactly. But the thing is, what the other teams don't understand, and what is mind-boggling to me, they're just like, you're so boring, do something. That it's their job to increase the risk and do something with their space. Because if we play boring and if we play safe, that gives you a lot of space to work with. And you have to up your aggression and do something with it. So if you do your job, it's not going to be boring. It's just, if you say, I want to make a catch, I waste a shot, he didn't throw it at me perfectly, I waste the ball again, then we got to play this for 1 minute because I'm here for it. And it's not spectacular. And even our guys don't like it. So I have to punish them really hard if they do make mistakes like that in training. And I'm really on them because it's just smart. And I think there are a few things we could change to make it more entertaining in the end. But at the end of the day, it's a team sport. And I think that is a good thing. If you're winning the first half of the set and you're winning the second third of the set, why should the opponent have an equal chance to you to win that set? He should have to dig deep and have to make something incredible to beat you. Otherwise, he's going to lose. And that's where I go, like a segue into my first criticism of foam, which I didn't want to do at this point, but I think it just fits. So that's the one thing that I don't like so much about foam, that it's, for me, more of a single player sport. So if you are the best player in the world in a foam team, you can beat pretty much, not everyone, but you can do a lot of damage. And in a cloth team, you can't. You can be the best player in your team, but if you don't have a team to support you, you're nothing on the world stage. You can do something in recreational leagues where there are random dudes against you, but at the top level, you can do nothing. And in foam, you can do a lot. So I think as a good player, foam is amazing. And it is really fun because, as you said, you can turn around 1 versus 4s, and that is absolutely fun. I love that. But as a team sport, I want it to be harder for one player to do something against the other guys. But I'll let you give your perspective on that, and then we're going to go to it more structured, I think.
Yeah, of course. So what I'll say to that, and I agree with the cloth part of it. Like, I think, I think like it being a full team game is great. And I think there are things I really don't like that you don't have to get everybody out. That's something that, like, you can lose a tournament and never get out. like in theory. Obviously never happened, probably will never happen. But like just the idea that you don't have to get everybody out, I don't like that. It feels anti-competitive to me. I think with the foam argument, I understand that. Although at Worlds, there's never been like a top team that has been carried by one player, right? So because you're playing other top teams, where in league and in like our like tournament series, one player can win a tournament, right? In theory, like they're just so much better than everybody else, they can win a tournament. But at Worlds, like that almost never happens. Now there are like 1v3s, 1v4s, but it's that player playing really special for that one game. But it's never been sustained over a tournament or over an entire match, even, right? Um, but my thing is like, if you are like, I want you to have to get me out, right? And I think in foam, I think it's relative to like, if you're on the world stage and you have four guys that are on their national foam team that are specialized in throwing this ball, they should be able to hit one target, right? I mean, more than me should hit four of them, right? So it still is earning their out. It is really hard to come back from a 1v4 or 1v3 or whatever. Like that, none of that is easy. It happens very rarely. I think I saw it happen once this Worlds, and I think it was like Eli against three in the final or something. He made a catch and it changed everything, right? But it doesn't happen that often. But the fact that it can happen to me is very interesting, because it makes the, and again, the foam rules aren't perfect. There are some that I don't like. Like, should there be a time limit on sets? Maybe, but I think at that point you should go into no block or something that forces you to get everybody out still. And I think, because what that'll do is that'll incentivize like playing the full 3 minutes the way that you play the first 90 seconds or whatever, right? And so with that, like I think like you should be able to dig yourself out of holes if you're that good. And again, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's the most exciting thing you've ever seen. Like you're like, oh God, he just did a 1v4. That's incredible. Ugh. And the other team is still trying to earn outs in a smart way. If they're smart. And you and I see the game very differently. So like the way that it's played a lot isn't the way that we would play it, right? So like you out there, if your team was up 4v1 on foam and you still had to get the player out, you probably wouldn't play it a way a lot of these teams play it, right? The reason I'm able to win 1v3s or 1v4s is because I know they're going to play dumb. And I know that if I play patient, take my shots here, I can get one at a time, and like whittle it down to 1v1, and then it's my game, right? And so I think again, it's kind of the same thing where like you play the whole game the same way, and even if you're 1v3, you still play it the same way. Like you don't rush out there and just do crazy stuff. You're still just patient, hitting your spots, and allowing them to make mistakes, because when you're up like that, you get confident and you get overconfident, and then you are a little bit lazier on your blocks, or you're a little bit lazier on your fallbacks, because it's like, oh, it's 3v1, we're gonna win this. We already won this. It's over, and then you're able to kind of like pick them apart. And I like that because if I don't know, I think like one like by yourself is still a big part of the game, where talent is important on the world stage. Now I know it's a team game, and it's like I think that's super important. I'm a team first person. Like when you were talking about like if people watch you play, they're like, well, he didn't do much. He was kind of boring. That's been my whole career. Like I have been looked at as like a boring player most of my career, because I am just super methodical. I don't go for these huge highlight throws or catches. I just hit my spots when I need to hit my spots, and I hit them in the feet. I don't blow people up, because what's the point of that? Like the out counts the same as if I hit their foot, as if I hit their face or their chest or whatever. But I think the watchability of it, I think, is also very important, right? Like we need people to want to watch dodgeball. And I think people watching a 1v3 like at the top level, knowing that the one can come back, is extremely exciting, right? And I think in class you lose that a little bit, right? And again, whether the first 2 minutes were exciting or not, that I'm not arguing that. Like I really like I thought our final was incredibly exciting. And I honestly don't think there was a point that like except that last one where Kim was 1v5 and he knew he couldn't win, so he goes up and makes a throw because he knew he's there's no coming back from that. Besides that, it didn't really feel like either team was milking clock too much, because it was pretty competitive. So I don't think we ran into that in our final at all. So that's not like, but I also think like people can unplug if it's 4v1. And it's like, okay, now they're just gonna, if they're smart like you, like play the rules, right? You play the rules. We have a play call that if we're up big like that, nothing close, right? Make them earn it. We're not gonna do anything stupid, and we're gonna waste a minute, and we're gonna win the set because a win's a win. Doesn't matter how you win it. A win is a win, right? When people look back at our final, they're gonna see first place Austria, second place US. Like people aren't gonna like most people aren't gonna watch the match. They're not gonna be like, oh, that was super competitive or super close. All they're gonna see is first place, second place, right? And so it doesn't matter how you win; it's just the win. Um, so playing within the rules, it makes sense, and I fully see your point there, and I don't disagree with it. I just the excitement of being able to come back 1v whatever, and being like, again, I'm a foam guy, so like I'm always gonna argue. I'm gonna argue foam because I love it. You know what I mean? And so, but as someone like, I want you to get me out. Like you have to earn that point by getting my whole team out, and I'm part of the team. And if my specialty is being by myself, then don't remove that from my game. You know, like we could have played the first 5 minutes really smart team dodgeball, and bad things could have happened, like a couple ricochets and a couple double outs, and it's whatever. And it's like, but now let me show you what I've worked on myself to, like, like in basketball, right? Basketball is a team sport, but when LeBron James needs to get points, he goes and gets points, right? Like Steph Curry, like it's a team game, but if his team's down 6 points and he needs to do something really special, he'll go one-on-one and he'll isolate and he'll hit threes, and that's like exciting to watch, right? Um, and I think that's why I think the phone rules are where I enjoy that, watching that more. Like I'm not going to say better or worse because that's subjective to like what you think. So I'm not trying to like say foam is better. I just prefer it because of that, I guess. And I think it's easier to watch. And we need people to watch dodgeball for it to survive. You know what I mean? Like if we're ever going to be in the Olympics or whatever these dreams are that we have, or pro leagues or whatever, like we need spectators that are like locked in and glued in. Whatever that means. And again, I'm not saying that is foam or is not cloth. Like I genuinely don't care. I just want it to happen. And that's where my like kind of argument comes in, is like, for me, it's easier, or it's more exciting to watch that like foam at the end and whatever. And again, some of the sets, like, and when I say this, I'm talking just worlds. Like, I think like sometimes if there's like women players that don't have the velocity of men, sets can go on way too long, right? Like there can be an 8-minute set and you're like, oh my God, just cut it. And I get that argument fully. But in the men's game, they're very rarely like, I think the final had 10 total points or 11 total points, which is like about 4 minutes per set. So it's kind of relative to like, it's, 25% longer than cloth, but it's not like crazy longer where it gets like, boring or whatever. And I think obviously the rules aren't perfect. The rules can be amended. But I think it's important to get everybody out. And I think it's important to, like, 6v6 is an important style. 5v5 is an important style, but also 3v5 is important because you need to see what this 3 can do against that 5. And I think being able to win from any position and any count adds intrigue for me, at least.
Okay, that's completely fair. And I think I absolutely get your point. And I think I absolutely get your perspective. And also there is like this perspective whether the goal of the game is to get points or the goal of the game is to get everyone out, which is like just two different goals, which doesn't mean one's better, one's worse, but it's just a different goal, how you get points. Let me just counter a few of those things, because I think, first of all, like the 1 versus 4 or 1 versus 3, I think in cloth it happens much more often than you think. And I think especially for you guys, it happens quite a lot. And that was against the top nations in the world, where you made lots of games where you won, where you were down 2, 3, maybe even 4 player ones. And I think just that added time pressure puts much more pressure on the single player to make something special and to create his own chances. And I think if you have all the time in the world, then it doesn't make much difference if you're 3 versus 5, 3 versus 6, 2 versus 4, 1 versus 3 even, where, as you said, the game is still the same and what you're doing is still the same. And I really enjoy that about Cloth, that there is lots of different situations. Like you can have 0 balls to 5 balls. You can have 1 player to 6 players. You can play against 1 player to 6 players. And you have the added time pressure, which makes all the difference. So 20 seconds left or 2 minutes left is a complete other ball game. And that adds so much nuance and complexity to the game that it makes it, for me personally, much more exciting. And I get the rare thing that happens sometimes where like one team is leading 5-1. It's 1.5 minutes left and we're playing down the clock 1.5 minutes. And I personally think that is only the mistake of the one player, because he didn't create any chances in that time. Because either it should be 1 versus 3, because the opponents played so safe that I just took some hits, because I can't take easy hits, especially in the men's, if my opponents play extremely safe. So I have to do something. And if it's still 1 versus 5, then you didn't do your job. And on the other side, if you're up 4 versus 1 and you manage to play 1 minute 4 versus 1 to a spectator who doesn't know anything about dodgeball, I think it's like the equivalent to soccer, where you like a 0-0 is the most boring game in the world to someone who just looks for the goals. But someone who watches the game, it could be the most dramatic game ever. And I think that's the same with dodgeball. And I think on the highest level, there are really, really rare cases where something that boring happens. It does. And it did happen against Northern Ireland because they actually didn't adapt to that strategy. And they were down a lot of sets, but they didn't adapt and they had no other gear in them. In the final, it didn't happen. Obviously, in the last set, it did. But like, I think at the world stage, it doesn't really matter because, as you said, if you play Malaysia versus US in the foam division, that's an amazing game. There are 6 amazing players on each side. Everyone can do the most athletic stuff. And basically, in the end, both are tactically quite great as far as I can tell. And whoever does better at that point will win it. And you can turn sets around. And even a 1 versus 3 at that level is spectacular. So I absolutely agree. At that level, it doesn't really make a difference. But one step below that, it makes a huge difference, in my opinion. And especially in the women's and in the mixed game, it makes a real difference, in my opinion, because sets can go on forever. And I think at the world stage, as you said, the most important thing is winning. So it's fair enough. Whoever plays better and uses the tactics to his advantage is better. But on a recreational level, that's not something I want. So even if you have 1 good player and 5 bad players, maybe the 1 player plays a 1 versus 5 in 7 minutes and everyone else is sitting on the sideline. And obviously, I come from a place of a lot of ignorance, and I know that because I haven't played a lot of foam. I have played some, and I personally really enjoy it because for Austrian standards, I'm quite good at it. So I can do stuff that you do at the world stage. I can do it in our local trainings, and it's really fun for me, but I don't enjoy it as a group experience as much. There are other things that I really like, but I think the time, it takes something away, definitely, but I think it adds much more complexity and it puts pressure on the player to make it exciting. And the other stuff is, it can be exciting, and at the world stage, I absolutely agree, it is absolutely exciting. But even if it's not exciting, in cloth, it's over after 1.5 minutes at least.
Yeah,
so
I agree with that.
That's also a fun thing. And in foam, I've seen sets that go on for 11 minutes and 9 of them were a 1 versus 1. I've seen that. And
no, I agree.
that wasn't really entertaining. So I think there's always levels to it where you say, for one level, it may fit and it may not make any difference, but for the whole sport, and I think we have to look at it from a spectator's point of view, from a professional's point of view, but also from a recreational and youth and everything point of view. And maybe we have to make different rules, maybe, but I think we can go much further. And I think at the end of the day, in my opinion, I would love to play foam with a time limit. That's just my opinion. Again, ignorance. I would say it's like 4 or 5 minutes maybe. And from that, you go to no blocking. I am a absolute fan of no blocking. I love it. I want it for cloth as well, because I think it adds a new skill to the game, a new kind of action to the game. It's something where you have to really switch fast from two completely different styles of creating chances and playing the game. So that's, in my opinion, really exciting. It may come with a lot of differences. And for me also, for cloth, it might be something where like after 3 minutes, maybe go to no blocking. For like, I have
I
a
suggested
proposal
that.
here.
That was my
Yeah,
suggestion. Like, I
yeah.
think that would be so exciting.
Yeah, I think so
You
too,
know?
but I wouldn't punish like the 4 versus 1 or the 2 versus 1. So what I would say is, if after 3 minutes it's a draw, then go to no blocking instantly. I don't like draws. So
Okay.
either no one gets a point or you go to no blocking. That's something I would think adds more pressure to the game, because you can't just slow the gate down and say, okay, it's 2 versus 2. We just want the time. We're up 2 plays, but you still have an incentive to win that set, because otherwise the other team wins. And also maybe give the team that eliminates all the players an incentive and give them an extra point for eliminating all the players in time, which is something I'm a big fan of, because it makes both things possible and makes it much more tactical and much more structured, but also maybe more exciting. And you don't lose one and add the other as well. And I think there will always be two ball types at least, and I think that's absolutely fine. Even on a world stage, I love that we're a connected world federation at the moment,
Agreed.
and I think we can learn a lot from it, because both sports are really young. As you said,
Mhm.
you've played it for 15 years. I've played cloth for 13 years or something, and I've
Mhm.
seen it grow from 3 ball cloth, where it was, even that was at the highest level, really exciting, but it was a boring game
Yeah.
compared to 5 ball cloth.
Yeah.
And so I think there's lots of improvements to be made. And
Mhm.
if you see something like that, where you go like at the highest level, maybe fine, but at the mid level, it could be more exciting. We want to make it more spectator friendly. We want to make it more fun for, I don't know, kids to play. Maybe we have to implement other rules.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So
I
that
think
is my kind, my
no, no.
case for
I think
time.
you make good points. I think I agree with you. Time should be in foam as well. That's not something that I will like. Again, at the highest level, you don't really run into it much. At least in men's. In women's, you do sometimes, because the velocity isn't there. Sometimes, again, I think the U.S. Canada women's final didn't really go. There wasn't any games that went too long either. But I agree with you. I think the time should be a factor, because a 7 minute set sucks. No matter how you shake it, it sucks, right? Um, but I do think I still think it's important to get everybody out. I do like the idea of going into no block, because no block is already prevalent in foam at the end of halves. So if it goes longer than, let's say 4 minutes or whatever, I think 4 minutes is a good number for foam, because then it does give you time to operate at the end a little bit. But again, then go to no block. That's then you got to get everybody out, and like you said, like strategies change in no block, and it completely changes. And then it gets really exciting, because every out could kind of be a big one, right? Like, and you don't waste throws in no block. Like, you're not like, oh, he's going to block this, or I'm going to play this and try to make him charge, because again, it's a coin flip a lot of time. Um, so I am a proponent of time limits on sets in foam, within reason of not kind of changing the game too much. But I agree, like on lower levels, it does become annoying. Like, and that was like cloth for our like little league that we did in our practices. Like, if the competition wasn't there, the 3 minute clock was a godsend, because it was like, okay, well, you only got to sit here for another a minute and a half of this, like, and then we can start again. So I do agree, like on the lower levels. On the higher levels, like, I don't like time, because I want to see the best players go against the best players and get them out. Like, I want them to force them to get them out, because rivalries are compelling. Watching like you and Koenig go at it is compelling. Me and Pine, when we went at it, is fun to watch, right? And I don't want the time to go off while we're going at it, right? Like, I want people want to see a winner. And again, within reason, like, but again, if it's two of the best, especially in foam, because like cloth obviously is a little different, because if you're proficient at blocking and you're at your back line, it's and also I think hand blocks should be allowed in foam. I don't know if people will like me saying that. It's way easier to ref. It just makes more sense. It's better for the flow of the game. I think hand blocking should be allowed in foam. Because I think cloth, there was significantly less screaming and yelling that I've ever had at a Worlds on the cloth side, because now there were times where people weren't taking outs. But that happens at every tournament. There's always people that don't take outs, whatever. That's, that's not something that I'm like, I ever am upset about, because I'm like, okay, whatever, just do it again, kind of thing, I never saw it with you guys, obviously, or England, or like none of the big countries ever did it. So I never had an issue with any of the countries that that were like really competitive, which is great. But there was no yelling. There was no, because if it hit your hands, you're like, oh, he's safe, no big deal. Like, but in foam, you're like, pretty sure they got your hands, and then everybody just chirps, and it's hard to ref, and it sucks. So I think hand blocking should be allowed in foam, in my opinion. But again, I think like the getting everybody out, I think, is really important, because it just creates rivalries. And hold on, sorry, I gotta plug in my computer. It creates like rivalries, and it creates really cool like moments of like the two best in the sport going at it, and you're like, oh god, who's gonna win? And then if time goes off and neither one of them win, you're like, oh, what a disappointing end. And again, we're talking highest level, right? Like, I'm like, at a league level, it's different. And I know that, like, I don't know if you can have different rules at the highest level versus league level. Like, I think that can create some kind of issues that you probably don't want. You want consistency, you want these things. So you do have to find a balance. You do have to find a balance with it. So I think that is important, but I think with cloth, right? Like, I love the idea of going to no block after the 3 minutes. I think, because what I also think that does, I think that incentivizes teams. Also, I think the extra point is another good example, or another good option. I think that's also a really good option. Because if you go to no block, like, I think it will incentivize teams to finish the games. And I don't think as many games will go to no block as people might think they will. Because teams like yours and teams like mine, when we're up 4-1, we're like, we don't need to get them out. Just win the set, whatever. But if it goes into no block kind of becomes a little bit of a crapshoot, and you can, like, it's easier to make mistakes in no blocks, and it's easier because you have to put it within a meter, but you also have to get him out. So you are throwing at body, whether it's super close or not. You have strategies that you'll employ, and these things that you'll do. But if it's going to no block at the end of the 3 minutes, then in my opinion, I think you're more likely to try to finish it within the 3 minutes anyways. So because you don't want it to go to no blocks, you're avoiding no block. So then that 4v1, you're more likely to put 3 balls on target, right? And the likelihood of catching 1 out of 3 is pretty small. It happens, of course it does. But again, like, if we run the numbers, like, probably less than 10% someone catches on a 3-ball throw, if it's top level. Again, if we argue lower levels, we can argue that all day. But like, if I'm playing against Austria, on a 3 or 4-ball throw, whatever, like, the chances of catching 1, probably less than 10%, right? And I think
you did it.
I when I said that, I was like, oh god, I'm gonna that
yes.
was, someone just left one high.
Yep. It was a mistake, and it was a tiny mistake. Like, it was a little bit of a miscommunication on our part, and you took advantage. And that is what I think is amazing, because if we played it perfectly, you wouldn't have caught it. But there is so much to, like, get in order in those 5 seconds that it's really tough to be the 4 guys. So I think one thing in cloth that is really entertaining, that it's much easier to be 1 person or 2 people, because it's much easier to, like, cooperate and organize your attacks and your defense. And if you're 4 people, it's much harder to make everything sync up perfectly, especially against good guys, because often in the end, really good guys are on the other side, so they're going to put a lot of pressure on you. They're going to try to do aggressive plays. So when you're trying to play safe, you're much more open for attacks, and then mistakes happen. And if a good player forces you to make a mistake, then he can take advantage of it. And that was, like, for me, the perfect example. We were like, I think the set was like, we were up 4-2. I don't know exactly, but it was 1 set, and I'm on the left side, and I call 3 or 4 balls on you, and I call them outside your body. And one of them just goes directly at your chest, and you jump. Every other ball follows my plan, and the one just hits you in the chest and you catch it, which is amazing. Which is, even if the ball was thrown wrongly and poorly, that is still such an amazing job to catch 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4, because there's so much going on that it's incredible to do that. And in that situation, I see that catch and I know that Payan is opposite of me without a ball. And I'm like, in my head, in one split second, I'm weighing the option, like, if I throw at him, there's a big chance he's going to catch me. But the only way that we win the set and I take our advantage back is if I hit him out now, because this is still a chance for me. So I took my chances and he caught me. And I knew that was a high probability that he's going to do that, because that's what he's going to do if I throw a standstill at his chest. But if he wouldn't have caught it, it would have been great for us. And so it was bad for us, but we were in a bad spot anyway. So I was like, I was taking that chance like consciously, and was fine with the result because it was planned for. But it's still like at that high level, if it's against anyone else, he makes the catch, I make the kill, nothing happens. But at the highest level, those little mistakes add up and change a game, a set completely. And that is something that is incredibly entertaining to me, and I think for spectators as well.
No, I agree.
But yeah,
I think that like brings you to like a point that I kind of wanted to make as well, is like one is not better than the other, and I didn't mean to say it, but I think like what you were saying with like the 5 seconds forcing action, right? I think with foam, the chess versus checkers thing is what we said at one point on that other podcast, right? That wasn't meant to be insulting. It was more like reactionary versus like, specific moves, where like foam, you will move a little bit slower in those instances because you have a full 10 seconds and you have like these things. So there can be like, if this happens, then this happens. And there's enough time for them to develop because you're not against the clock, right? And whether or not that's exciting, more exciting or less exciting to watch, like that's not for me to say, because I'm biased, so my opinion doesn't really matter, right? So like, but again, I think that's where the difference lies, right? Or one of the big difference lies is like in foam, I can make a play call that is like, I can get all of our guys together and I can make a play call that's like, okay, this person shoots at this target. If he hits, then this person shoots at that target, right? And I can take that time to be specific and allow that, because we have 10 seconds for the play to develop, right? And once one ball comes out, the 10 seconds starts over, right? And so you have time to play with. Now, again, whether that is boring to watch from the outside or not, I don't know, because I'm not on the outside, so I can't speak on that. But I think that allows a level of it that cloth doesn't have. And again, not bad or good. It's just like you said, with cloth, it has to be quicker and more reactionary. And when Pine and I were talking about it, it was Pine's like, I really like cloth. Like I think he prefers foam, but I don't know anymore, because he loves cloth because he's great at it. But he's a very reactionary player. And he said that, he goes, I like cloth because it's quicker paced, and like just gameplay wise, like quick plays happen in foam, obviously, but like the 10 seconds versus 5 seconds is significant. And he was like, so it is a lot more reactionary, where foam is seemingly a little bit more methodical. And again, not that cloth isn't methodical at all, right? But the 10 seconds or 5 seconds, like you really do have to be significantly quicker. And that is something that, like, has goods and bads or whatever, but that was like the chess versus checkers thing. It wasn't like one's not as good as the other. It's just like the moves that I could make. And again, it is just personal opinion. Like, it's just my experience, right? Like, so I'm not a cloth expert by any stretch of the imagination. I had a little over a year to try to beat you guys and to try to beat England and try to figure out how to play this game at the highest level. So I am not an expert by any stretch. Just again, in my experience, like it was like the amount that you can do. And also 6 balls adds significantly more possibilities to play calls, right? Just sheer math, right? Like, because in cloth, you don't have a 3-ball defense, right? It doesn't exist in cloth because you're never on defense with 3 balls, right? Because you're offense. Where foam, you have full parts of like strategies that are based on 3-ball defense. And depending on what that ball does when it comes across is how many balls you can throw out at which target, right? So there's like a lot of moves and counter moves that, again, doesn't make it better. It just makes it different. And because there's because there's more balls, there's more possibilities for uh of throws, right? Because again, like you guys also don't have um you have like uh in foam there's 1 ball, 2 ball, 3 ball defense, right? And in cloth there's 1 ball, 2 ball defense. I don't count 0 balls because there's not really defense there for either side. It's just like you're just trying to stay alive, right? And same with like the offensive side of foam. There's like 3, 4, and 5 that happen often, and in cloth there's like 3 and 4, right? Again, we can say 6 and 5 if we want to add all balls, but again, that's so rare at that level. That it like if you have like you'll have 4 balls often in foam. Like every game you'll have 4 balls at some point because one team will be down humans, so you'll have to give them 4 balls for them to get burden. So you'll always have 4 ball throws. You'll always have multi throws, right? Where in cloth that doesn't always happen. Again, not good or bad. Just like cloth is a lot of single ball offense, right? To like get the ball rolling and to kind of, and especially if you play against you guys and like against us, we didn't have very many 4 ball plays against you guys. Like in that final, we had very few of them, and I don't think we gave you guys a lot of them either. So it was like a lot of quick single ball, like charging down and taking advantage of players in bad positions and these kind of things. And again, not good or bad, just different. And that's kind of like my thing is like as a heady player, I like the more options of offense and defense because it adds like wrinkles to it. Like when I did, because I wrote this this foam playbook, for 2019, and it wasn't like huge, but it was like, this is what we do on 1 ball defense, 2 ball defense, 3 ball defense. And there was like obviously sections of each. And then it was like, 3 ball offense, 4 ball offense, 5 ball offense, sections of each or whatever. And there's play calls and there's like, if this happens, then this happens, because burden can change mid-turn in foam. If like we're even bodies and have 3 balls and I hit someone, now burden's back on us, not on them. Right. Because now we have more bodies on the court. So there's little like nuance things. But then when it came to cloth, like I had to remove a bunch of them just because like there isn't 3 ball defense. There isn't like a lot of like, there's no 5 ball, like there's no 5 ball sets where you're not against like a pressure ball, right? Because like in cloth, that's 4 balls against 1 ball, foam 5 against 1, obviously. And so it's just different. And that was like, again, I didn't mean to be offensive with that like chess checkers thing. It was just there is more possibilities mathematically with 6 ball versus 5 ball. In my experience.
Yeah, that's absolutely. And I get that like numerically, it absolutely makes sense. In my head, it's the opposite. But again, I come from a place of ignorance, but I'll try to share my side.
No, let it rip. I love it.
The thing is, in foam, you have more balls, so you have more individual actions you can plan for and can say like, this guy throws at this guy, and if he throws, then this guy throws. So you can plan more moves ahead, and you have more action plays with balls in hand. And I think that is absolutely valid, and that's how I think a bit about foam. I think about foam, and again, correct me if I'm you definitely do have a much deeper understanding, so I just saw a little bit of it. But like for me, it's a huddle. You have time, you have no pressure, and you decide what you do. You decide on whom you throw, when something happens, how you react and stuff. And then for a short period of time, it gets really fast, because the moment you do something, the opposite side reacts. And like throws and counter throws are like the bread and butter of the top teams, I would say. Like knowing someone releases, and the moment I see someone release, I counter and act, and back and forth like that. So this is a big part of the game. The second thing is where you make a single ball throw on ball, because you can get through a block, and if you hit if you throw at him, he can't counter play and can't counter throw. So you reduce one big option of the opposite side. And then there is not much like running down or counter attacks where you run opponents down, because you don't need to, because you can do a standing counter, which is just as effective, because you can throw the ball so much harder without any run up and stuff. But in my opinion, that reduces a lot of the possibilities and a lot of the tactics. So in foam, you have more play calls, but in cloth, you have much more nuanced situations where you have to know in the situation when it arises what the whole team needs to do. So I think of Cloth much more of a game where you do a lot of damage and a lot of playmaking without throwing the ball. So the most important thing is in Cloth what you do when you don't throw. Throwing is easy. Throwing at the right point, throwing at the right target, that's a skill and everyone should have that. But the most important thing is how you increase the possibility of that single ball to reach its target without getting hit. And if you release, the opponent is going to do something against it. And in Cloth, you can't do the counter throw that effective, but you showed us that it's quite effective of a tool. But if you do the counter throw standing, then it's a really fast reaction time and it's very hard to dodge that ball. But you have to reduce a lot of velocity and give that up. So it gives the opponents a lot of opportunities. If I need a catch, I will factor that in and I will get you to do a counter on me, for example. And if the counter is thrown, our side has to react again. And you know that our side has to react. So if you do the counter, you're ready for a catch. And if you do a counter to the middle player, your wing is probably going to do the punishing on you. So you have a single ball coming at you without much speed because he's standing as well. So you can plan for a catch in that situation. But the opponent knows this as well. So if he just does what you think he will do, then it's easy. And that's what good players do. And bad players fall into those traps. But if you want to increase your chances, you have to think way farther ahead. And that's why I think of Cloth as chess, because you can plan for I release the ball, he releases the ball, I release the ball. You have to counter in a lot of factors that are not ball specific. So I have to factor in if he throws the ball, he's going to expect this. On the other side, the player is going to expect something else. And if I want to increase my chances without getting caught and make something of my offense, I have to be more creative and have to have much more options. So just for a little example, I say our middle player throws and he throws at our number 3. So in the middle of your guys. So to increase his chances of hitting that player, I will do a fake at the same time at your middle player, try to get his focus so he doesn't see the ball coming. The moment I don't look at my player, he's going to have room to hit me out, do something else. So I have to factor that in and maybe have to go a step back. If I do that, the player in the middle sees, he's not taking his step to the front line. What does that mean? So there are lots of factors in between. And if you do a counter throw and your player is going to punish you basically for that throw, and that, then your chances are, as a good catcher, very, very good. You like those chances. That's why you always do the counter throws, because at the end, they give you everything you want, basically, and you can control the situation really easily. So in order to counter that, I maybe do a cross on you and let the middle player throw 2 balls. Then you have your focus elsewhere, and I try to do lots of plays in between the plays that doesn't involve the ball at all, that doesn't involve throwing the ball, but just to prepare the next attack or the attack after that. And so I think, and I mean that's completely normal because you thought the game through very well for 2 years, I think, but there are still lots of levels. And I think, for example, if we switched positions and I had your guys, I think I would have won the World Championships because you have so much raw talent and you did a great job, an amazing job. And for 1 year of preparation, the tactics were spectacular, were really good. And they were much better than lots of European nations have developed them by now. But still, there is, in my opinion, we are 2, maybe 3 steps ahead of that. And and the final was by far our worst game tactically. And that wasn't because we were bad. That was because you made us make mistakes. And you put so much unexpected things in front of us that our tactics didn't survive everything, and not everything we calculated came into being. So there's still a lot to improve there, but that's how I think about the game. I don't think about the throw I'm going to take. I think about when I take the throw, what the opponent's going to do. And that's level 1. And then I think if I did just that. And the next time, if I just fake, what's the opponent gonna do? And I prepare my opponent for something later on. Like, for example, a catch. I'm not a good catcher, but I have prepared a few tricks where I can catch people. And in the game, I try to put people in situations that, in 3 cents, if the opportunity arises, he thinks he has to take this shot at me. And I know he's going to take that shot at me. And that's when I'm going to try to take the catch. And that's something I've prepared a lot for, like, Northern Ireland, and it worked perfectly. Against you guys, it didn't, because I didn't think I needed it. Against England, I knew I might need it, and I made one catch, I think, the whole game, and it was because I needed to, not because I wanted to, not because it's my strength, but it was the only option left to me. But I've prepared the whole situation so that it could come to fruition. And if the opponents would have been smarter, they would not have done it. And it was a big mistake on their part. And if they watch it now, they're like, how the fuck didn't we just hold the ball and do nothing? Nothing. But in the situation with 40 minutes behind you, you can't keep ahead that level. And so there are so many games in the game. And I think 5 balls are perfect for that, because it always puts the pressure on someone to be in another position. So if you have 3 balls and the opponent has 3 balls, you have lots of opportunities. So between attack and defense, there isn't much of a difference, like who is in the advantage, I would say. I don't know, but I would say that. And in Cloth, there is a lot of advantages and disadvantages, but they're quite different for both sides. And I wouldn't say some teams like the defense, like you guys, definitely love the defensive part, because you can react. And if the opponent reacts to your reaction, that is something you love. And that is what England does. And that is something you're really good at. And so for us, it took away a big part of our game, because we knew we couldn't do that. So because we couldn't do it, your counter throws were much more effective, because we didn't have the perfect answer to it. And so we had to change the game and throw differently, that you couldn't make those counter hits as easily, or we had to get you out. And so, but as I've played this game for 10 years and thought deeply about it for 6 years, so of course I'm very much biased for Cloth, and not to say I don't like foam. And I think if I would have started with foam, I would think the same way about foam as you do. And because I just understand it to a deeper level and have much more appreciation for the in-between plays. If you're a spectator, you just see the epic dodge, the epic catch, the epic throw, but you have no idea what the player who just stood in the corner and looked boring, what he just did so that this could happen.
So what I will say, sorry.
No, I think
it's, and I'm not even countering your point. I think the way that you described Cloth is the way that we play foam. Like, it's not, I think it's relative to your knowledge of the style, right? Like, again, we had a year and a half to learn, or a year really, to learn Cloth, right? And we were not at your guys' level tactically. We knew we weren't. We knew we weren't going to be. We had to get as close as we could, and we had to put ourselves in a position to use our talent to try to do what we had with what we had, right? Our knowledge of the game was still lacking, as it will. Like, you're never going to be as good as the best teams in the world tactically after a year if they've done it for 10 or 7 or whatever, right? That's a hard ask, and it's impossible on that level. But what I will say is,
it would be very sad for the sport.
Yeah,
so if
exactly.
you could do that, then the sport wouldn't be deep at all. So
yes. And I think what gave us the ability to get as far as we did, and do as well as we did, is our foam background, right? Because I see the way that you described Cloth is how I play foam. Like, it's not just, it's 3 moves ahead. It's like, if I put it here, he'll do it here, and then this leads to this, and this leads to this. And it's moves and counter moves, and it's moving pieces on the board and taking pieces off the board, right? It's like, is this player worth this ball? Even letting some of your guys get out to put their best guy in a position to get out, right? Like, I really think it's relative to the depth at which, like, you think about it. I don't think either one of them has an advantage in that, in my opinion. Again, I don't know cloth as well as I know foam, so I think about foam way deeper, and I've thought about foam way deeper than cloth. But the way that you're describing cloth, like, makes sense to me. It's how I play foam. It's how I see foam. I see the game. I see every potential move that can happen on the court, and I see it with the balls going back and forth. And I'm like, okay, he'll do this. This will happen here. This will happen here. And you play the whole match out, and you're like, if we do it this way, we're going to win. Period. And big hits happen and big catches happen or whatever. But if you play the full 40 minutes, this specific game plan locked up and tight and ready to go, then the spectacular plays will always happen, but they won't dictate a match, right? Like, they'll dictate a game in the match maybe, or there'll be a game that gets away from you. But if the whole 40 minutes is your game plan, the way that you see it happening, then the 40 minutes is yours. And no matter how good they play, like, if you play the way that you're supposed to, and again, like, the way that you talk about cloth is like how I see, like, I watch, like, before I go into a foam match, like big match or whatever, worlds, I play that match out in my head with their lineup versus our lineup, our one or two subs versus their one or two subs, and positionally. And I'm like, okay, like, they're going to do this when they have 3 balls on defense, if those are the 2 corners. And when this happens, then they react this way if we do this, right? And so you just play all those moves out in your head. And again, tactically, I think, and I never, like, I never thought cloth was less tactical, like, because you have to do more with less balls, and I understand that side of it. Like, but I also don't think that is lost in foam either. So, like, solo ball throws in cloth, like, where you were talking, like, well, if I pump middle, will he have to move? Like, and you're opening a shot up for your middle, because if you draw his eyes here, it brings the percentage of your throwers time up, right? Well, that also happens in foam. Like, there are single balls that happen, and if you pump at the same time, or 3 of you pump here, and then your thrower throws a half second behind, and they're already moving, right? And then now that percentage of that throw goes way up, because you've dictated that movement before the ball actually comes out, right? And so we try to do that in cloth a lot as well. Like, we tried to mistime things to get you guys to move first, right? Where, like, you move on my pump fake, and then the ball comes out whatever later to, like, and you guys did the same thing. And top teams, I imagine, have similar strategies to create movement without throws, right? Because, like you said, it's not all about the throws. It's about what you do before the throw, what you do after the throw, what you do leading into a throw or reacting to a throw. And you can convince your opponent you're going to do something because you did it a few times before, that now they plan for that and they fall into that trap. And now you can take a few pieces off the board because the way you played the first 2 sets now dictates the way you play the rest of the game. And now they think you're going to do it every time. And now the rest of the 40 minutes is yours, even if you give up the first 2 sets. But you have now shown them that how they can beat you. And now they're like, well, that's the only way we can beat them. And then you totally shift what you were doing to then a different plan. And then, you run them off the court. Or you can run them off the court, right? So I think, like, the way that you think about foam, or the way that you think about cloth, is the way that I think about foam. I think the tactics are there. I like the ball better. Because the velocity's there. You can kind of throw it from anywhere on the court, and it's good and bad. Like, I understand the good and bad of it. It's like, I understand, like, I like the idea of being able to be hit by anybody because it keeps me sharp. And I think, like, and again, I think coming from foam made us better cloth players, because our reaction time has to be quicker. Our hand-eye coordination has to be quicker, and not that it is quicker than yours, but it's quicker than it is with a cloth ball, because the cloth ball just doesn't travel as fast, right? It doesn't move as quickly, right? And in foam, you can't get comfortable blocking because you can get around blockers, right? In cloth, a lot of times you can set up and block and kind of do your thing. And you and I's games are very similar there. Like, not a lot of players are going to blow through my blocking cloth, if I'm set up on my back line. But in foam, like, everybody at that stage can. So you have to dodge and block at the same time. And again, not saying it's better or worse. It just, you're never comfortable. And that's exciting to me. I'm not that you're ever comfortable in, like, that final. I was never, like, comfortable, like, being like, yeah, I'm going to just do this or whatever, so it's not saying that it was, but, like, the awareness in foam for me was always, and again, this is a place of not knowing cloth to the highest level that you do. Tried to, gave it a shot. But again, like I do believe that we were as good as we were because of our foam backgrounds. And because,
Definitely, yeah.
you know what I mean? Like I think that really helped us. And I think if you look at like teams that went from cloth to foam versus foam to cloth, right? Like there is a big like drop off. Like I was talking to one of the England dudes as well, and he's like, I mean, we went foam 4 years ago and we're not even in the top 6 or 7, you know. And then we went cloth, obviously, and being a foam country. And again, not saying it's, you know, better or worse or whatever. I think the foam background helped us a little bit is all.
Definitely. And I think on that point, like the switching of styles, I think there are a few points on that, because one thing, the balls are really different. And I think on a just throwing basis, the cloth ball is much easier because it just moves straight. So if you can throw it, if you can hold it, there's not as much that you can do with your throw. So basically, if you have a hard throw, you can curve it a little bit. Some people can, some people can't, but you can make it fly like a foam ball. So like the skill of throwing in foam is much more high value. So cloth, everyone at the top level can throw around 100 kilometers per hour. Don't know what that's in miles, like 60 or something. So some can throw 10 miles faster, which is rare, and some throw 5 miles slower. But I think the difference in throwing is not that big. So you have to do much more to set up a hit. So in foam, if you're a great thrower and you can throw a ball around the block and you come from a baseball perspective and you have been throwing for 20 years, then you're going to be really, really successful and good at that. So in order to like counter that, you have to be really good at blocking and at hand-eye coordination, and you have to be really good at dodging. But the thing is, that's like my only, and it's not a critique. It's just a difference where I think in cloth, you have to set up a hit much more than you have to do it in foam. And you have to play much more as a team to get a hit. And in foam, if you are a great shooter, you don't need those pump fakes. And they're great if they are there. But I've watched the finals, and there in cloth, the synchronized pump fake is a really important tool. And if you can break that up in your defense, which we did against you guys, for example, your single hit percentage drops down drastically. And if you can create pressure without throwing, you make the attack much, much easier to survive. And in foam, you can. So even if you, the fakes are there in foam, and the fakes are really aggressive because you can't lose the ball, and you don't know when a player is throwing, when a player is just fopping, but you don't need to synchronize it. You just have a few people faking at different times, and it creates enough chaos that it's hard to track one ball because you don't know at which point someone's going to release. So I think it's much, and that's not better or worse, that's just different. So in cloth, you have to be really, really synced and really on one line at the same pace. And if you move as a team, you have a much bigger advantage. And in foam, if you can throw hard and you fake 3 times and the third one comes around the blocking ball, it doesn't really matter if you have someone supporting you. Of course, it's good and it creates different chances, but it's not that much of a detriment. And that's why you can do much more as a single player to hit people out, because you can still, with fakes and throws alone, do a lot of damage. And in cloth, you really need your team to set them up. And that's why it's, for me, more complex in that way. In other ways, foam is much more complex, but like in creating chances and playing as a team without having the extra time of telling everyone when you have to move, creates a lot of need for tactics to be pre-learned, and that everyone has the right principles, that he knows in that situation, this is expected of me, and so on. So it's just different things. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation, because I don't think it's cloth versus foam. I think it's cloth and it's foam. And those are both really great games, and they both can improve. And I am not happy with all the cloth rules, not at all. And I won't defend them even against foam players. And I find foam players are the same way. So I love cloth. I love the game, but there is lots to improve. And There are
Yes. Same
lots
with
of
foam.
deeper levels. And I think as the sports get more professional, there are lots of deeper levels to still unlock that just needs so much more time and effort to
Mm-hmm.
unlock,
Mm-hmm.
because you have to practice so much to get that in the understanding and that team coordination.
Yeah, I
So,
agree. I think. Oh, sorry.
no, just because I've taken a lot of your time today, and I still have two small topics,
Yeah, yeah.
hopefully. So if
Let it
you're
rip.
still up for it, it will be
Yeah,
awesome. So,
I got a few minutes left.
because I'm not here to say which one is better.
Okay.
I'm, but I want to know the differences and what we can improve. So you said
Okay.
you like the foam ball more
Mm-hmm.
because everyone can throw it. And
Yes.
I think that's an absolutely valid point. I also love the foam ball because it doesn't injure you as easily as a cloth ball.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, what I really like about the cloth ball is that you can throw it where you want with a very high percentage. And
Mm-hmm.
I know really good foam players can do the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
but not on everything. So like if you do a curve, it's got a window where it's gonna hit. And
Mm-hmm.
if you do a straight shot, maybe you can be more accurate. But still at the best level, you see guys throwing it into the stands and into the floor,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't usually happen with cloth. So I think it's a difference, and I love throwing foam balls as well because it's fun and it's easier in one way, but it's harder in another way. So I think that it's just something that if you learn it, and if you come from a baseball background, which obviously the US guys do much more than in Austria and Europe, where we come more from a handball background. So we're just used to different balls. And for us, it's much harder to throw the foam balls
Mm-hmm.
the way you do. And like, I think what we saw now, that players that come from a foam background who've played really, really high level foam and played other sports, other variations as well, like no sting or 8.5 and stuff, that it transfers very well to cloth. And if
Mm-hmm.
you get your tactics right, then you can be competitive at your own level as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think we haven't seen that in foam yet because no European nation has had the best six guys of their last decade and let them try foam. So for us, it's often that like the players that didn't make the squad and still wanted to come, or players that for some reason or another didn't want to play cloth and tried foam. And so they're not dodgeballers that at the utmost level in their sports. Like you
Mm-hmm.
came from the top level, have thought everything through, have seen everything, and went to a different ball type. So the switch was very easy, and you could bring that level and raise it up really quick. So if you and I think it's going to be really interesting to see that if more top level player, and I think we've seen it a little bit with England, where some really good players, not the top level players, but
Yeah.
still some really, really good players like Skinner, who's been playing cloth for ages, and Straubs, who really, like in the opening match, put Malaysia to a test. So it
Yeah.
was the runaway game for Malaysia,
That
and
was fun to
England
watch.
absolutely. And England brought a lot of that cloth mentality and the teamwork to the game and interpreted it a little bit different, worked different with fakes and double pole attacks and stuff, and made that also really successful. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what cloth players can do in foam as well. And probably it's going to change the sport as well. But on that part, one more thing I wanted to talk to you about is the refereeing, because you said you were really not happy with like some rules where the refs have a lot of power
Mm-hmm. Of
in cloth. And I'm not here to critique it because I think the
course.
same way, I think. And I'm just gonna let you take it from here. What is your standpoint on like the rules and the way refs implement it in the cloth versus the foam?
Yeah, I think. I mean, again, foam has its own like things. I wasn't asked about the foam refing, that's why I didn't like comment on it. I have my my grievances with that as well. Like as you do, nothing's perfect. But I think with cloth, at least, the difference is the referees are much more prevalent in cloth, and they have significantly more power to dictate a match. Right, like foam, the penalties are losing a ball, or the penalties are that one player is out, or little things that don't swing an entire match, where in cloth one little infraction can lose you a set and cost you 2 points essentially, right? And I think that's too much power to give a ref that sees the game different than every other ref sees the game, right? So when it becomes ref discretion is a term that we used a lot, and a term that was told to us a lot. It creates different matches and they're played differently because of the ref that is reffing, right? Where our England semifinal was awesome. We were pointing and we were yelling at each other and we were talking trash, and it was amazing because the ref was okay with it. He was like, "That's fine. Nobody's crossed the line. Nobody's like said anything inappropriate or whatever, but we're chirping and it's part of the sport, right?" And then the very next game was our third place game, and there was one little point at a ball on the ground, and we got a blue card that potentially cost us the bronze medal, right? And Max came up and he's like, "That's a really tough call. I wouldn't have made that," right? And it's little things like, and I'm not blaming the ref for making the call. That's fine. The rule is pointing card, get it, okay? But I think that rule sucks, and I think the interpretation of that rule is not the same across all refs, because some refs are okay with it, some aren't, and some, and I think that's where my problem is. Like, if the refs are given that much power, then they have the ability to swing the match, and then it takes it out of the player's hands. And I think that is what bothers me the most about cloth. And again, foam has its own thing, like, but if you false start, right, they get all balls. Like, that is such a damaging, like, way to start. Like, you should just start with all three then, or 4-1, or what, like, but like giving them all five and allowing that set to basically, if they do their job, to be done right when it starts, and of course you can come back. There's ways to come back, but if you get like three people out with those first five balls, it's really hard to come back from that, right? And that's just a small infraction that dictates a set. And if it's a big important set, it feels like it dictates the match. Now, the pointing in our third place match was like, Glenn just did like an underhand, like not even like it was like an underhand, like what, got a blue card, and we had to play 5 for the deciding game. Now, you can say, well, it shouldn't have been that close at the end, and there's always things to argue. There's always like, this, but then you fixate on the ref side of it. And when you fixate on refs, you don't, like, the players don't get their due for earning that win, right? Because the team that lost is like, well, we would have won if it wasn't for the refs. And the team that won gets their victory taken away from them because of the refs, right? And they're like, like now we didn't beat them, the refs beat them, and they did, and that's not the case, because they won the previous, whatever sets to make it a tie, or there always are factors. But what people remember is the end of it, and if the ref dictates it, or people remember being screwed more than they remember getting beat, right? And I think that's my biggest issue, is how damaging little things are, right? Like, where the best thing a ref can be is invisible. And I think the hand block is beautiful. And I think that is a rule you guys have nailed. And that makes that ref's job easier, right? And so there's no even like question. It's like, nope, that was hand. Okay, cool, right? Where foam, we don't have that. And so foam, there's a lot of like hit us in the hand. And the ref's like, how am I know it hit him in the fingers? Like, that's crazy. Like, how do I know that? And so foam is lacking there. But if there's a ball infraction that happens in foam, you just lose the ball. You don't. But if a ball infraction happens in cloth, you play down a set. You play the next set with 5 if you roll a ball, or do something like that, like, where it dictates too much of the match for my liking. I want the players to decide the match, right? Like, I want to play against you and your team. I don't want to play against you and your team and the refs, because that ref has subconscious bias, even if they want to admit it or not, right? Some, like, refs almost never go into a game and be like, I actually don't care who wins. Now, I'm not saying that dictates their calls, but are certain teams looked at more harshly than others? Probably. Like, that's natural, right? Like if one team is screaming and yelling the whole tournament and they play against the nicest team, well, the likelihood of them, the mean team, getting calls against them is much higher, because you don't want them to do well because they were mean to you or whatever. And whether that's good or bad, that's human nature. And I think if we're able to remove that and allow the refs to be as invisible as possible, I think that is something that cloth would really benefit from. Because again, like, if you guys false started in that final, let's just for an easy example, you guys false started in that overtime match. We got all 5 balls, and we win the overtime game because we got all 5 balls. That sucks for both teams. that sucks for both teams because of how damaging that is to you and how advantageous it is to us. I would have felt like we didn't earn that win, and you guys would have felt like you didn't earn the loss, and it would have been all about like, and so I think that sucks. That's what I don't like. And again, foam has its own shortcomings, but the power of the ref is wild to me in cloth, and I don't love it. But that's it.
Absolutely. I absolutely understand your point. The thing is, or where I have to counter it a little bit,
Of
is
course.
that the problem isn't the rules, in my opinion. So the problem isn't that the rule is flawed or that refs interpret it differently, which is the problem. The problem is that there is still a lot of difference from different regulations from countries where, like, the English and the British nations still play to different rules than like the Central European nations, and the WDF has another rule set than the EDF, which creates for a lot of minor differences, which can make a huge difference. So for example, the EDF rule is when you do a false start, you can just stop your run because you've done a false start and nothing happens. And the opponent, if you stop your run before the return line, so you have 3 meters, then nothing happens. The opponent gets the third ball, everything good. Love that rule. For some reason, and I have no idea why, the WDF doesn't have that rule and has still the hard penalty where you give all 5 balls away, which is stupid in my opinion.
Agreed.
The other side on that is it's a very easy thing to avoid. So if I'm in a final and in the overtime set, I tell my runner, don't get the ball. I don't care, but don't do this infraction because this is just too costly. So every rule, there's like 2 sides to it. And I think like the false start, I think it's a stupid rule, but it's an easy rule to avoid. So you say it's a stupid rule, but I can adhere. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
We never false
the
started.
Same thing like with the rolling back of the ball. Like for foam players, they're used to rolling back the balls. For cloth players in England, they're used to be allowed to do that. And there is a case for it and against it. I'm a really big proponent of not allowing the opponents to roll the balls back because it has a lot of tactical implications. If I hit someone out in the neutral zone, I can do much riskier plays because I know if I hit him out, I get his ball. So it adds a new layer of complexity to the game. The problem is that we have different rules. So if players are not used to it, they make these minor mistakes not out of bad will, just out of habit. And that's stupid if you're punished for that. So
but it's the amount of punishment though that is I don't mind the rule. Like I like the setting the ball down because you caught a player in a bad position. That's tactically you made a good play. That's your ball. But if they roll it back, like that player shouldn't be out the next game. You should just give the ball to the other team, right? Like it's just the amount of punishment for the rule is what I have issue with, not necessarily the rule itself.
I honestly, I thought about that, and maybe you should just give the ball over. It's completely fine by me. But I think like the blue card with starting with 5 players in cloth isn't that big of a deal. So it's a punishment, and it might seem in the last set it's a real big punishment.
Yeah.
In a set in between, it doesn't matter. So 5 versus 6 does not make any difference in cloth in the middle, in my opinion. Of course, it makes a difference, but not such a big one. So I don't mind either way. So I don't think it's that big of a punishment, and I think it's good that you enforce those laws with punishment that you feel, because it's a rule, and whatever is like the right punishment is up for debate. And so that's a fair point. And it just sucks that many players are used to different rules, so they come to this tournament and just have to change everything they've done for the last year, and that is something we have to fix. And so the overlying problem is changing rules from tournament to tournament and still haven't figured out a good rule book, and then changing them too late, and then changing them with the wrong people in the wrong spots, where they're like in Edmonton, there were so many stupid rules that were just adopted from foam to cloth, which don't make any sense in cloth, but it was the rules, and it didn't make that much of a difference. But I think rules should always be with the focus of not making the job harder for the refs, because the job of a ref in a dodgeball game with 5 or 6 balls is incredibly hard. So
Yeah,
it should always be on the side of it should be easier for the ref.
agree
And
completely.
secondly, it shouldn't be the way that infringement that has nothing to do with the play can impact a game extremely hard without it being something actually unfair. So I
Mhm.
don't like the finger pointing rule, because if someone just points at someone because he's stoked that he hit him or whatever, then I have no problem with it.
Yeah.
If players are not punished for that and they're just like in foam with every ball that is thrown and maybe have been blocked or not, maybe
Yeah.
have been a finger block or may have hit his toes, it just creates such a poisonous atmosphere for the whole sport, which makes it even harder for the refs. So I am a big fan of punishing that really hard. The thing is, there is a
Okay.
gray area where
Yeah.
like people are pumped up and celebrating is a great thing, and the sport needs it.
Mhm.
What the sport doesn't need is people pointing at other players and trying to convince the ref of something,
Mhm.
or like actually try to, I don't know, be mean to opponents, which doesn't really happen. But for example, in the Edmonton game between England and US, there was a lot of taunting, and some of it was good natured, but it got out of control and then it wasn't anymore. So I
Yeah.
think it should be the clear distinction that celebrating a win, a victory, a hit is completely fine, but
Mhm.
telling an opponent, I hit you, or I think you were out, or you suck, or something like that, that
Yeah.
should be punished really hard. And I think the distinction, it's up to the ref's discretion. You
Mhm.
can't decide it any different, but
Yeah.
it's not such an hard distinction to make. For example, when when I celebrate a hit or something, I always just um, started to do that. I always turn around and
Mhm.
celebrate to my team and not the opponent. So it's
Yeah.
clear that I not point at everyone. That's just something I got used to because I don't want to infringe on any rules and get out for this. But I think the sense for this rule is really good. But again, if you have refs that came from different leagues, came from different rule sets, that's a big problem. And I think that is something we really have to get rid of for the next Worlds. And I think we will do that. But that was clearly something that hasn't been done for this Worlds up to the best standards. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I know some of them, I don't know others. And I was not happy with all the rules. But at the end of the day, everyone knew the rules in advance.
Mhm.
And if you
And everybody has to
can't
play the same
handle
rules.
them, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I agree.
So,
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think I'm a little different. I'll make this quick. I'm a little different with the like the shit talking. I I love that. I think that is compelling. You know what I mean? Like again, good natured. Like I think there's a point where it becomes inappropriate, or if it becomes to a point where it like might get physical or what. Obviously, there are levels to it. But if I'm playing against like a great player and he makes a great play on me and like waves me off or does something like awesome, you made a great play, like glare at me or talk a little shit, that's fine. Like I'm okay. It fires me up. Like I think I looked at you a couple times during the final, where I like looked over and I was like kind of glaring a little bit. But again, like that's just like you're their guy, and I'm trying to like trying to get in your head a little bit. It's just gamesmanship, and it's not And in the semis against England, like I was shit talking a lot, and their guys were doing this and like waving and like and honestly, it never reached a point where it felt inappropriate, and that's when I think it's okay, right? Is like because also people like to see that. Like if you're spectating and you're watching two of the best go at it, and you can tell that they're passionate about it and like they want to win like that, I'm glued in. Like I'm like just so jacked about that. So that's kind of where. But I agree, if it gets to a point where like it becomes like it can't be vulgar, like it can't be like no vulgarities, no like no swearing or anything like physical
but the
threats
thing
or
is,
you know
exactly, like, I'm absolutely with you on all of this. And personally, I love shit talking. I love trash talking. I'm up for it
it's
all day.
great. Yeah.
And I try to convey that with my eyes. So
Mhm.
if someone does something, I try to all communicate with the way I smile, basically. so
Yeah.
which no ref has ever called.
Yeah.
So that
Same.
is just my way of doing it. But I think it's just a really fine line then, because
Yeah, I agree.
the the level is different for everyone. And if you have countries that speak different languages where you don't
Mhm.
know what they said, it's very hard for the refs. So I understand why you have to err on the side of we have to infringe it a little more so it
Yeah.
doesn't get out of hand. Because the thing is, dodgeball is a very competitive game and you try to hit people out. So you have to try to be aggressive. And
Yeah.
sometimes, and I think on a recreational basis, we see it all the time, it gets the better of people's emotion and then it gets really aggressive. So at
Mhm.
the pro level, we really have to keep the violence and the aggression out of it without losing like the taunting and the in between moments and shit talking. So I think it's a fine line to walk, and I think the rule is good, and I think everything that crosses that line should be punished harshly, because like unfair play and cheating, it's something that kills the sport completely and it can ruin everything. We've seen
I
it
don't,
all the time in like aggressive sports like MMA or stuff, where like if people get emotional and get fired up too much, then it happens. And
yeah.
dodgeball is a sport where it does happen and where it will happen. And so I understand the rule and I'm for the rule, even though personally I'd like a bit more of the shit talking. So I think it's a fine line. I think reffing is always a big issue for sports that aren't professional and don't have a lot of money. And I'm thankful for every ref. And I know every player feels that way. I know in the moment it's nothing more frustrating than stupid calls or wrong calls and refs who overstep their boundaries. But I understand it. I mean, reffing dodgeball is one of the hardest things, I feel
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
and you have to
It sucks. It
trust the
sucks to
teams
the ref.
extremely. And
Yeah.
you saw at the highest level, it works really great because the
Yeah.
teams know they have come there because they know they want to play their best and beat the other teams at their best.
Yeah.
So the refs don't have to do a lot of things. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's just chaotic. And until we have VAR, it's going to be that way. And that's
Yeah.
fine because that doesn't usually decide games. And if it does, then it's so close that it's a coin flip anyway. So
Yeah.
I think
And the
that's
final was
always going
super
to
clean.
be
Like like you
absolutely.
said, the
So
final was clean. There was no I have no argument about that. And the semi
absolutely.
against
Like I think the semis as well, it was dodgeball at its highest levels. There was no unfair play or intentional unfair play. It was
Mhm.
dodgeball. And there are some ref calls because there are so complex situations that even like with you guys against England, there was one situation where 5 guys got hit equally and the refs had to stop the game for 2 minutes, which sucks as a
Yeah.
spectator. But
Yeah.
and they made almost the right call. I think
Yeah.
you should have had one more player. I think it was you who got hit on the foot.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I
And I
had
made
to
it pro.
rewind it like exactly. And I had to
Yeah.
rewind it like 10 times to see everything. And the
Yeah.
refs did a like 90% correct
Yeah.
decision,
Yeah.
which is absolutely mind blowing.
They were
But
great. They did
yeah,
great. I have
yeah,
no
absolutely.
they
So
were awesome.
that happens. But I think, yeah, we have to get the rules cleaner, easier for the refs, and more coherent for both ball types,
Mhm.
and get them clear for all the tournaments so that we can move on to other stuff that is just more important.
Yes,
And
agreed. It's
yeah,
just a
I think
it's a
that's
natural evolution, right? It's the natural evolution of the game.
absolutely,
You're gonna have
yeah,
hiccups. Just learn from them. Just
absolutely.
yeah, I'm with you.
Nate, it's been an absolutely blast to talk to you. I hope
Hey,
people gonna enjoy this 2.5 hour conversation. I'm gonna split it up, but for me personally, it flew by. I love doing this, and I hope to
same
talk to you soon. I love picking your brain. I think we could talk dodgeball for days.
for days and days. It was like talking to you for like how I think. I was like, he's saying everything that I'm thinking. It's crazy. I have to say, I have to say real quick, you are a huge reason why I came out of retirement this time to play cloth. Because I saw like you and Koenig specifically, because you guys were the two best in cloth, and you guys are incredible in the way that you guys led your teams, and like you, I think you and I are more similar than me and Brett. So I watched how you led your teams, and I watched how they loved you and how they responded to you, and I was like, that feels very familiar to me. And I know that we played you, but we didn't like I didn't play you in your ball, right? I was like I played them in my ball and played them in their ball. Like I want to like I want to try to get good at this ball and play them in their home, like at their like. So it was a huge honor to play you guys. And that final was amazing. Like obviously, I wish we would have won, but if we were going to lose to anyone, it was you guys at home. You know, to you. So you were a huge reason why I came out and played this last Worlds because I wanted the experience of playing against you and your team. So it was an absolute pleasure to play against you guys, and you guys are a class team, and that you can tell how much your team respects and loves you. So I just appreciate and respect that.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate it. And right back at you.
Man.
I mean, this conversation proves it to me. You're a class act. I love you, brother. This has been awesome.
Thank you. You too.
And to everyone who made it this far, thank you so much for listening. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Nate. If you have any opinions and critiques on the topics we discussed, please feel free to write it in the comments or send me a DM via social media. And with that, keep throwing those balls, try not to get caught, and take care, everyone.